Mike Wright is a host and founder of the Fantasy Footballers podcast, one of the most decorated sports shows on the planet. He used to be on Team Man Bun, he loves both Antonio Gibson and a Goofy movie, and he's a serious sneakerhead. These are his late round perspectives. You know, I didn't have this on the in the show sheet, but I do have to talk about Antonio Gibson. Isn't that like?
Oh my God!
Isn't it just like any show that you do? You just have to talk about Antonio Gibson. Because look, here's the thing, man. I like Antonio Gibson as a player too. Like I'm borderline truther status, and then week 1 happens, and I think, look, this is a take that I threw out there on the mailbag episode, but I think that Antonio Gibson might be like a super buy low right now. And I say that because in week 1, the carry split between Robinson and Gibson before that fumble was 4-3. Things were trending the way that we basically thought that backfield might trend. But are you done? Are you just over Antonio Gibson at this point?
I can't be done because that's impossible. It's impossible for me to quit Antonio Gibson, but it was a brutal start. And who I quit Ron Rivera. That's who I quit. Stop suboptimally using your players.
Yeah.
Like what? Yeah. And for people who didn't see the Brian Robinson touchdown, the catch, I don't know that target was going to Brian Robinson. It looks like the ball was kind of in his vicinity, so it wasn't a great pass because there's two people in the same spot, and Robinson took it to his credit, and then he scored. But it's been so frustrating. Even when Antonio Gibson has been great, it's been like you just want to rip your hair out of why did you draft this player in the 3rd to use him like this? Like it. Yeah, it's so frustrating.
I feel you 100%. I think he's more talented than others do, and clearly the coaching staff does. And look, the coaching staff even last year with like Sam Howell and the way that they didn't get him reps, and he's clearly a better option than a Taylor Heineke. I mean, you know, I do have to question that. I think there's a low key chance that this is where I just fire off my hot takes on late round perspectives. But
let's go, baby.
I think there's a low key chance that he's going to be on the hot seat like halfway through the year.
I had talked about like preseason. I had mentioned several times about like, well, don't worry about next year because Rivera's not going to be here.
Yeah. Let's talk about week 1. It just happened, right?
All right.
It's very easy to overreact based on what happened in week 1. You know, we go all off season studying and researching this stuff. And then it's sort of like week 1 is our first test of the season, right? Like we're finally hitting that like finals week. And then it's just boom, you got your first test done. And week 1, you know, for me was kind of average, maybe a little bit below average. Didn't feel great with some of these players, especially like a Drake London and folks like that. But clearly there's a small sample size that we're working with here, right? It's week 1. So I want to ask you, what's your sort of philosophy here? Are you someone do you think that you overreact more than other analysts, more than other players do? Or do you think that you underreact versus what other people do?
I'd say personally, I've evolved where many years ago, I would have reacted very heavily and swiftly and immediately. But now, you know, I'm more open to ideas of not just targets, you know, the like targets per route run, all of those types of things factor stronger into my analysis now. So I can look at someone, not like the targets per route run were terrible, but I can look at like Sky Moore and people are ready to, you know, Anchorman Baxter punt this guy off of a bridge. And which I feel it. I mean, I played him week 1. Like I drafted him. I wasn't like super into Sky Moore, but it's a 2nd-year wide receiver in a great situation. Oh crap. I took the bait. Like I put my hand in the trap because Travis Kelce was out. And it's, well, let's see what we can do on opening night. This is going to be super fun. It was not super fun if you put Sky Moore into your lineup. It was really awesome. The first 6 plays. And you see him on the field nonstop. You go, it's going to work out.
Yeah.
It's going to work out. And then it just never did. So I'm willing to have patience with that situation at least one more week.
Mm-hmm.
If we have another cardio king, Sky Moore is out there, I will not be making that. Well, he's on the field for 75% of the snaps. Like, if he's not getting targets, I'm going to move on because MVS is the exact same thing for the Chiefs. Like, he was the guy who was out there all the time last year, but he wasn't the one who ended up with the production.
Yeah.
So I'm trying not to overreact to that situation. Like Drake London, same thing. That one felt really, really bad. I mean, the draft pick was a much higher investment than Sky Moore.
Right.
And, oh, my freaking Arthur coming out with he just dumped a whole bunch of salt into the wounds that he's put onto our bodies.
Yeah.
And it's like, shut up, fantasy players, which is it gets me, man.
It does for me too. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the fact that he's sitting there saying that Drake London doesn't care about fantasy football.
Oh, that's bull crap.
Drake London might not care about fantasy football, but Drake London cares if he's getting the ball. He's an alpha wide receiver in the NFL. Of course he cares.
Yes, and you know who should also care? Your fan base. You're the Atlanta Falcons fan base. Great, you got the W. Sure, week 1. That feels really, really good against a situation you should have easily won the game.
Right.
But you have now spent 2 top 10 picks. Well, London was 8. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then Pitts was 3 or 4.
4, yeah.
You've spent insane draft capital on these players, and you're like, no, I don't use them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the dysfunction between you and the general manager of bringing these guys in? Like, you could have had a killer defensive piece.
Right.
At least an option. So the win covers a win is a salve for almost everything. But under the surface, if I'm an Atlanta fan and they've done this, I would be furious.
Yeah. Here's the thing that's really unfortunate too with someone like London, who if you watch him last year, our buddy Matt Harmon with reception perception, he charts these guys and he saw studliness from Drake London.
Yes.
Every metric imaginable showed studliness from Drake London last year. Everything pointed in the right direction. And so my outlook on London was, regardless of situation, I want to bet on good players, period. Like the Falcons offense, if that Falcons offense just had a little bit more passing, I'm talking like a 52% pass rate instead of a 45% one, or even a 50% one, then all of a sudden he can easily outplay his ADP, right? Because if he is as good as everything indicated in year 1, and then goes out in week 1, obviously they go very run heavy once again in a positive game script, or at least a fairly good game script for them. He gets 1 target, and then now in week 2, you're sitting there and I have a lot of Drake London, and I'm like, I can't start him. I can't play Drake London this week. He gets Jair Alexander, all these. And so if the bad outing happens this week again, right? And we can pinpoint the matchup a little bit more for Drake London this week if the numbers don't show. And then it's week 3, and week 3 and 4, he's got good matchups. Like, they're there. But then all of a sudden in week 3, you don't have, the confidence to be able to throw him in your lineup because he didn't do well in week 2, even if the matchup had something to do with that. And so basically what I'm getting at is, hopefully Drake London can put together like a 4 for 60 line this weekend, right?
Oh, please.
It doesn't have to be remarkable because we know that it's going to be a tough matchup. Doesn't have to be amazing. But we just need a sign of life, because then in week 3, it's either Seattle or Detroit, but they get those 2 teams in week 3 and week 4. But in those matchups, then you can more confidently play them in those potential negative game scripts.
Yeah, if we see like 4 or fewer targets this week, you're all right. It's Detroit in week 3, and then Jacksonville.
Oh, Jacksonville, that's what it was.
I mean, it's such a brutal situation because that's one of the things that where my process has shifted is the situation versus talent, and the situation still 100 not 100. It still matters,
right?
It still should factor into everything, but I mean, you miss out on we've missed out on. I've missed out on so many good players because I'm like, well, their situation is just garbage. It's like A.J. Brown when he was coming to the league, so excited for A.J. Brown to get in the draft. Tennessee Titans. Okay, well, he's toast, and then of course he's not toast because he's a great player, and they figured out how to use him. So, I bet on the talent of Drake London in quite a few spots as well. So just give us 5 targets, man.
Yeah.
If you give me 5 targets, then I'll put him into the Detroit matchup, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's going to be our line. If he hits 5 targets, we're victory lapping this weekend.
Yeah, we are. You're like, yeah, but he was only 1 for 24. You're like, I don't care. I got my 5 targets.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so moving on from more situation-based stuff to more player-focused stuff. One of the biggest stories that came out of week 1, probably the biggest story in fantasy football because he was usually the number 1 waiver ad, was Puka Nacua. So where do you stand with him moving forward? Do you think that was just a blip? Is he going to become irrelevant if and when Cooper Kupp returns? Or do you think that people should have sort of gone nuts and spent a lot of FAB on him?
The situation that we find ourselves in for week 2 is extremely difficult because in week 1, when a rookie in their first game, 15 targets, I think it was, it was just ridiculous. You have to go after that. You have to chase it. This is not Ogletree caught 2 touchdowns on 4 targets or whatever, where the production's there, but there's nothing behind it. This was, holy crap, this rookie is a revelation. Is this the new Robert Woods for Sean McVay and that offense? Like, can he fill into that role? Who knows when Cooper Kupp is going to be back? You still have to say if Cooper Kupp is back this year. It could be week 5. It could be never. So you have to play like Cooper Kupp is not there. So go after Puka. And yet you find him against the San Francisco 49ers, who will be able to put far more pressure onto Matthew Stafford. The Seattle Seahawks, I mean, they were generating nothing. Stafford looked so good. Just watching the game, I mean, he was sharp. The passes were exactly where they needed to be, and he had a player in Puka who could fulfill when those opportunities were given. So I think we can say that, yeah, Puka's a good player, but I'm very, very worried about the rubber band snapping completely the other direction in this matchup, and then all hell is going to break loose when Puka is 2 for 28 this week on 6 targets, and people are like, well, I dumped all the FAB, and then maybe then it's an opportunity to be opportunistic and go scoop up Puka for far cheaper than they did. But season long, it's hard to not be in on what you saw week 1. And the game could have been so much bigger. I mean, you had at least the one route I can think of where Puka laid out and Stafford overthrew him by like a half a foot. If that pass is just slightly better, Puka scores again. It's like, so I'm in on Puka, but I am very concerned. I missed out on him everywhere. Because I had to bid on stupid running backs, of course. So I didn't have the FAB for Puka, but I'm concerned for the people that dumped heavily into week 2, because if you did, you have to play him.
Right.
Like you can't spend 20+% of your season FAB and then be like, sweet, go on my bench there, guy, and we'll see what happens. No, you plug him right in.
Right, and you're going to play him after he sees 15 targets the week prior, right?
Yes.
That's the other thing,
exactly.
is that you just can't let that sit on your bench. You're gonna want him in there at least as like your wide receiver 3 or your flex. I'm in on Nacua. I agree with you that when you see younger players really break out and have games like this, especially when they have, I talked about this in the mailbag too, but especially when they have a backbone, the way that, like Zay Flowers, for instance, is a lot easier to say, okay, I'm gonna be in. We're gonna talk about him in a little bit, but Zay Flowers is a lot easier to say, oh yeah, I mean, he's a stud because he was a first round pick. He had this great production, yada yada yada.
Right.
Everything looked good for him in the draft as a prospect, all that. Nacua falls. He's a day 3 guy, and realistically, if you look at history of day 3 players who did what he did week 1. I looked at guys who had a 25% target share or better since 2011 in week 1 as rookies, and it's not great. I mean, the best comp, honestly, if you just strictly look at day 3, right? I'm not talking about like because there were a lot of day 1 guys, a handful of them, and day 2 that did fine. But Rashad Green was one. I think he was day 3, but he was one back in Jacksonville, and he saw 13 targets. His first ever NFL game, he saw 13 targets. He maxed out the rest of his career. He never saw a game with more than 4 after that. And so, you have a little bit of that going where you're like, I'm a little fearful that it could go that direction. But, I wasn't prospecting the way that I am now when Rashad Green was a rookie. It was like 2015 or something like that. And I liked Nacua enough as a prospect to say, and then you combine that with, all the hype that was going on out of Rams camp. I mean, there are certain teams that beat writers are pretty on point with, and there are certain teams where they're not as on point with, and there are certain beat writers that are very on point.
Of course.
And I got to give Jordan Rodriguez from The Athletic a ton of props for 2 calls with the Rams this year. She was hyping up Puka Nacua, talking about how the team really liked him a lot and et cetera, during the summer and in July and such. And then the other thing that she talked about was Kyren Williams, where she said that Kyren Williams was going to dig into Cam Akers' role, and that really changed my mind in the way, I wasn't really aggressively drafting Akers, but I actually ended up making Akers a fade because of that report and because of the way that we saw some of that usage playing out. And then you look at Kyren Williams in week 1, he was their RB1. I know that Akers ended up seeing more touches, but Williams outsnapped Akers 26-4 in the first half. He saw dramatically more routes run than Akers. Do you think that is for real? Do you think, look, to be fair, we saw this with the Rams even last year with Darrell Henderson, right?
Yes.
And so do you think this is for real? Are you buying heavily into Kyren Williams? Are you just saying, I'll see if I can get him off the waiver wire and kind of go from there? Or are you going to take the contrarian route and go the Cam Akers way?
I will not go the Cam Akers route. I will buy into Kyren being the guy. And that's having followed the entire story of Cam Akers, Cameron, as we call him on the Footballers podcast. We've made him more formal.
Yes, of course.
But like the tale of last year was so wild, of the fact that he was even back from the Achilles injury, which is like, at least we don't have a ton of guys with the Achilles injury, right? But it's kind of been the end, or at least the end for multiple years. So he's back. That's already fascinating. But then you get, I don't remember, like a month, maybe 6 weeks in, and then we have the whole explosion over social media, the reports. The coaching staff says that Akers is not going to take another snap for this team, and we are going to trade him. He's inactive. They're actually trying to get rid of him.
Right.
Shockingly, nobody wants a running back coming off an Achilles tear where you don't know for sure that he's back. Shocking stuff. And so then the Rams, to their credit, kind of tucked tail. But kind of at this point, their season was already toast because Kupp's shut down, Matthew Stafford is shut down. We just got to put somebody out there, and it turns into Akers having this huge role, and then he's fantastic with it. Not against the toughest of competition, but it's still, you can only play the team who's in front of you, and he was great. And so then the question that we had to wrestle with all offseason is he that good, and do the Rams, because I don't know where you were on Akers coming into the league. He was a very exciting prospect.
Yeah, I liked him a lot. Yeah.
Like the draft capital, everything pointed to Akers is going to have a good career for fantasy football for us. So you had to balance all that with everything that had gone on. So it's not shocking. And on top of that, we also had the vague reports after week 1 where Kyren Williams got hurt on special teams, and that's where we saw a whole bunch of Akers, and it was like, what are we doing here? And it was, the report was actually Kyren Williams was supposed to be this guy. That was their plan all along, which I get it. Some beat reporters, they talk about like they're not allowed to share certain things,
right?
Which is, I don't know, it's just this weird agreement that they have with teams. But you had to at least hold on to that too. That's strange. They wanted to feature Kyren Williams, but he got I think a high ankle sprain right at the beginning of the year, and a high ankle sprain for a running back, it can derail a whole season, which it basically did that to Kyren. So that information is all still there. So it's not shocking what happened in week 1. It's not shocking that a player that McVay was like, I don't want you on my team.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just had to give him all the work. And now you look back and you go, were they featuring him to maybe trade him? Were they punishing? They're like, hey, Akers, why don't you go take some more snaps, buddy? These games are worthless. Go get beat up. Like, there's just so many human elements that we don't have access to. But anyway, that's a really long-winded way of me saying it should not be surprising that Kyren Williams has ended up being the preferred running back for Sean McVay and co. Now, does that translate into actual fantasy value? It's the same thing as I'm terrified of Puka for week 2. Kyren against the 49ers, like with not that the Steelers, you were hoping they had fixed the offensive line at least a little bit, but Najee and Warren, I mean, there's nothing, absolute nothingness. Right. You think that the Rams are going to be able to get it done? It's like, I have no confidence in that.
Yeah, I think the other thing too with Kyren is I didn't like, he was fine as a prospect, but he didn't have the explosiveness. He had a horrible speed score. I mean, like
the combine destroyed him because he was when we always start our scouting process around January when the regular season ends.
Yep, same.
These people that can do college and the pros, shout out to you. Yeah. I do not have the mental bandwidth or energy in my old man body to handle that. So I start scouting guys in January, pretty fresh, and like I don't keep up with college. I don't know what's going on. So everything is pretty fresh to me. I just kind of see who's trending to be drafted. I'm like, or and always the combine invite list gives you a really good indicator. Yeah. But Kyren's tape was so freaking impressive of him at Notre Dame. I mean, like, just he was smaller, but I mean, he's breaking tackles all over the place. He didn't look slow in the college tape, but then the old combine came through, and you were hoping it was okay. This is a Dalvin Cook situation. I watched Dalvin Cook. I watched him play in college. He was incredible. He tanked the combine. They took him in the second round. He was fantastic. Nope. The draft said, we do not care about this player.
Right, exactly. Like the other, like his speed score was so bad, which is weight adjusted 40 time for those who are totally unaware, but his speed score was so bad that the players that have been successful with his low of a speed score, because speed score alone is not incredibly predictive, but when you look at it with certain thresholds, it can be at least kind of throw guys out and say, you don't really need to go after this player necessarily, unless other things in part of his profile can really elevate that low speed score. Kyren Williams is a great pass catcher, which is something that I always look for. I know you do too. Great pass catcher coming out. But that speed score just tanked him, and all the players who even had a little bit higher speed score compared to Kyren have not been successful in the NFL. And that to me is one of the biggest things with Williams and what differentiated, at least for me, Puka to Kyren in terms of adding guys off the waiver wire, or at least recommending, to folks about guys off the waiver wire, is I just don't know if Kyren Williams is a great running back. Like, I think that he could be solid. I think a lot, but I just think a lot of running backs can be solid. Like it's there's people that are talking junk on Rachaad White right now, for instance, and how inefficient he was, which I am. Yeah. Totally understand that. But at the same time, there's only, to me, instead of looking at the running back position from the perspective of, there's all these different tiers and layers. To me, it's literally just, are you a true difference maker? Are you Derrick Henry, Breece Hall, these rushers that, I mean, like Breece Hall on this past week just showed us all like how elite he actually is, right? And so are you that kind of player? Oh, you're not? Okay, well then we're just going to cross our fingers and hope that your team gives you a lot of volume, right? Like that's and hopefully you're a pass catcher, which is exactly what we want for fantasy, right? Of course. Which is my argument sort of like with like a Rachaad White right now, where it's like, yeah, I don't know if he's going to be that electric as a runner. I don't think he will be that electric as a runner. But if you look at all the peripherals week 1, he was top 10 in route participation, he was top 5 in snap share. If that continues, period, he could be trash and still be okay in fantasy football, And I kind of see that with the Kyren Williams. I don't think Kyren Williams is trash. I don't think Rachaad White's trash. But I'm just saying, like, with a player like Williams, it's hard to go so hard with him because I don't know if the talent's obviously not Breece Hall-esque. But this coaching staff seems to favor him, so you should at least be looking at him off the waiver wire.
yeah, you have to care about who the coach cares about, because it's not like there's not 3 running backs on the field at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
There's just the one, and I understand week 1 that's a big win for LA. That's a big win for the Rams, but and maybe maybe the whole world of football is wrong about the Rams. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But this was one of the teams that is favored to get the number 1 overall pick.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're already – like, a lot of LA fans are already drafting Williams as their starting quarterback of the future. Maybe not anymore that you won week 1, which Arizona we appreciate that. Thank you for winning that game, LA. But it's like, was that just are we all wrong, or is that like or is that a trend? Like, the Rams are just going to be one of those teams that surprise us and they're way better than they are, because they will have to be. They will have to be way better than you thought they were going to be for Kyren to actually pay off.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. All right, so speaking of Breece Hall, right? Just brought up Breece Hall. This is what we call a transition, a segue in the biz.
Very professional.
Yeah, very, very good. Breece Hall's teammate is Garrett Wilson. And Garrett Wilson longer – I opened the show saying that Puka Nacua was probably the biggest story, which he probably is in fantasy, but from a real football standpoint, it's obviously Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers out for the year. You go to Zach Wilson. It sounds like it's going to be Zach Wilson. And, look, it's not like there's like these obvious answers at quarterback out there for New York to just go out and get. We'll see what ends up happening, by the end of the season. But right now, Zach Wilson's the guy. So you go from Garrett Wilson with Aaron Rodgers, where he was looking like he was going to be a bona fide stud wide receiver in fantasy. Now he's got Zach Wilson. Where is the wide receiver line for him for you, right? What's the worst wide receiver right now that you would take over Garrett Wilson?
Oh, man. I mean, we're right back to talent versus opportunity.
That's right. Yeah. It's tough.
Because while he was the offensive rookie of the year, there is a direct correlation. Last year, there was a direct correlation between games that were Zach Wilson and games that were not.
Mm-hmm.
And Garrett Wilson was much, much better in the games that Zach Wilson was not the starting quarterback. Maybe he picked up enough from Aaron Rodgers. I won't completely rule that out. Like, when you get someone in with that vast amount of knowledge that is willing to share that knowledge with you, you can elevate. I mean, over a couple months of training camp, I'm sure that Aaron Rodgers has improved Zach Wilson tremendously.
Yeah.
Like, way more than just throwing him out there for a few years that he would learn on his own. So that part is, I'll leave room for that. But like, we fielded a question that was actually, thankfully, it was easy. It was, I have an offer right now. I can trade Garrett Wilson for T. Higgins. And we're like, yeah, you smashed that button.
Yeah.
I hope that didn't get retracted, and you can go get that offer done right now. I mean, worst. I'm trying to look through the rankings for this week, and I'm going pretty far down, and I'm saying yes mentally. Maybe Amari Cooper might be a line I would draw. I have been pretty firmly on the outside of the Cleveland Browns offense and not being in on Deshaun Watson, which all the arguments of like, well, Watson was good just a couple years ago. Those are all very valid to me, but I can't throw out last year.
Yeah,
like it was so atrocious. Well, the guy hadn't played football in 2 years. Yeah, but I see guys off the street put up better games than Deshaun Watson was putting up, and unfortunately, I can't take anything from week 1,
right?
Because it was in the rain. Watson had terrible throws. He had good throws. Joe Burrow had only terrible throws, and it's like I'm not changing my opinion on Joe Burrow being bad in the rain, so I'm not letting that change how I think about Deshaun Watson.
Right.
But I have strong concerns about, does Watson actually have that? And Amari Cooper's snap share, was that completely the injury? Like the little tweak that he got in week 1, the fact that Elijah Moore is there and got a bunch of targets, he's looking good, and Peoples-Jones has his role. So I think Amari Cooper might be that line where I'm not sure who I'd prefer. It's probably Cooper, but that's like right about there. At least I'm looking at this week's rankings.
Yeah.
Which I guess I have some guys ranked under that, like Lockett. I would take. I'm worried about Seattle, which you in your very professional outline you sent me. They had a letterhead on it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I do it. I do it big here. I do it big with
what kind of big time stuff? You got this graphic with the lasers going everywhere.
Yeah, man.
I mean, this is incredible work. This is incredible work for one person.
Thank you.
But it's like I'd trade for Lockett. Zay Flowers, yeah, I'd buy in. But that was because that's week 1 just confirmed all my priors on Zay Flowers,
right.
so I'm victory lapping that. Man, would you trade Michael Pittman? Would you trade Garrett Wilson for Michael Pittman?
I'd take Garrett Wilson over Michael Pittman.
Okay, yeah. I would too, but that's like.
I understand.
Dude, this sucks.
Yeah, I mean, look,
it sucks so much.
What you're getting at is that it's alarming and it's frightening, right? Because I do think that we could see a scenario where he's still a high-end wide receiver too. Like, it's still in his range of outcomes because Zach Wilson might.
That's so sad to say. Like,
yeah, right.
If he peaks this season, he might be a wide receiver too.
Right.
Like, oh my God, this guy was like we were drafting him going top 5 is possible.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so I do think too, another like really interesting sort of comparison to make here is earlier the offseason. I know you're a Chris Olave guy. I'm a Chris Olave guy.
Yes.
And earlier the offseason, even last year, when Garrett Wilson deserved to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, I'm not taking that away at all. He's a stud. He's an unbelievable wide receiver. I just think that Chris Olave is also an unbelievable wide receiver. And if you break down their numbers and you look at their per game numbers, you look at their efficiency metrics, Chris Olave was literally better than Garrett Wilson last year at every single level, right? Within those metrics. I'm not saying he's a better wide receiver. I'm not saying, but I do think that they're at least very, very close from a talent perspective and from an ability perspective. And what really separated Garrett Wilson from Chris Olave is Wilson's entering a season with Rodgers and a lack of competition in that offense, Allen Lazard being the 2. Whereas, I liked Rashid Shaheed. I thought Michael Thomas was commanding a lot of targets last season before he got hurt, And so there was at least reason to not be as bullish on Olave as Garrett Wilson. And so if the difference is really situation, right, between those two in the short term, long term, whatever, but in the short term, to me, it was also sort of a differentiator from a dynasty perspective to put Wilson over Olave, but I was still higher than the market basically on both of those guys. But now Aaron Rodgers is out of the picture. You absolutely cannot look at those two players and say, I'm going to take Garrett Wilson over a Chris Olave. I just, from a strictly a logic perspective. So you kind of have to use that perspective, that logic, that process when going down these wide receiver rankings and see where you would place Wilson. When I initially did my rest of season rankings, it was basically Monday night and into Tuesday morning, so I didn't really sit down and think about it and ruminate on it enough.
Just trying to react.
Yeah, and he was still sort of like a high-end 2, mid-range 2, but I'm going to be updating that basically today, and it's going to be dropping because I've thought about it more, looked at the splits a little bit more with Zach Wilson, and it's scary. Not only that, man, they get Dallas this week, and that offense could get destroyed this week, and then you're going to be able to have more of a, if you really want to, more of a buy low, even a buy lower moment with Garrett Wilson. Now, I don't always like to use the matchups to dictate that, because if Garrett Wilson comes out and balls out, then you're just not going to get Garrett Wilson, because he does well in a tough matchup, and then people are like, oh,
but he won't.
Yeah, but I don't feel overly confident given the way Dallas's defense played week 1 and what we know about Zach Wilson, that this Jets offense is just going to all of a sudden dominate. And they're probably going to be, pretty run heavy overall. I'm still, here's the thing though. I'm still in on Breece Hall.
Yeah.
Like, I am not concerned about Breece Hall given the way he looked week 1. I think Dalvin Cook to me looked slow, did not look explosive. Maybe it's just because we're looking at him in comparison to Breece Hall, who is insane. But I just think that the workload's going to grow, and I could see him easily being an RB1, low end RB1, especially when it matters most during the second half of the year.
Yeah, it's back to last year's New York Jets, which is defense and run the ball and try to have Zach Wilson not lose us the game. I know the coaching staff, they're saying all the right things, and it's a much different situation. We talked about this on our show, is like the world is rooting for Zach Wilson now.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like the public sentiment is completely changed.
Yep.
So really hope that Zach Wilson does not waste this opportunity, because last year it was the entire public sentiment is let's tune into the Jets and watch Zach Wilson fall on his face because it's really, really funny and it's going to happen.
Yeah.
This year it's wild how that stuff happens, but they'll try and hide Zach. It's going to be a lower passing volume. The targets to the running back will go up, especially as Breece Hall continues to get healthy. So yeah, I'm not worried about Breece Hall. You're a little bit bummed out in that, like, once Breece is healthy, if Rodgers were the quarterback of this team and this offense is going like we had all projected, Breece Hall over the second half of the season could be like a league-winning running back. And not that he can't do that, as he rips off a 80-yard scamper on like 70% of a leg or something like that. But the probability of him hitting that top 3 huge boom for the second half, it goes down.
Yeah, for sure. And the fact that he is, what I talked about earlier, he's one of those, like, I actually think a differentiator on the ground where you just don't have many differentiators on the ground. That means that not only is he going to probably see a decent enough target share, but that means that his rushes are going to be more valuable than what a typical running back rush is going to look like, because we know that he can do what he did, on that Monday night game and break out those huge runs. Let's just talk about Zay Flowers and gush over him a little bit.
All right,
let's do it. Does that sound fun? Does that sound good?
Yeah.
If you were drafting right now today, how high? And I can throw out some names too, some wide receivers.
Sure.
If you would draft him over them. But how high do you think, like round or pick, what have you? Where would you be drafting Zay Flowers?
So, I didn't go back and look at ADP. The 5th was what kind of stood out to me, because we're all. The Zay Flowers backers, we're all doing the I told you so right now. Mm-hmm. But you have to factor in Mark Andrews did not play in this game, and Isaiah Likely was not the replacement tight end that people had hoped for with his one catch.
Yeah.
Mark Andrews will come in and immediately command the target share that Mark Andrews demands. That, like, Zay Flowers, I think you just book it. Zay Flowers is the wide receiver 1 for this team.
Yeah.
But that's the wide receiver 1. That's not the number 1 pass catcher for this team. So I can see the targets going down from where they were. He's still going to be a great player, but you can't, because it wasn't the full power of the Ravens offense, I don't think you can say for sure we know what the ceiling will be for Zay Flowers. Or maybe Mark Andrews comes in, gets his share, but the offense is so much better that now we have a bunch of more scoring opportunities for Zay Flowers, or it takes pressure off and now Zay Flowers has like easy catches. You know what I mean? Where it doesn't all have to be completely manufactured. It's let the defense key on Mark Andrews in the middle of the field, and then, Zay Flowers slips. He's on the outside of the number, something like that.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go absolutely insane. 5th round, maybe he would sneak into the 4th. I can't share. You can share some names and we'll play the game.
Yeah, let's play the game. Okay, I'll start lower. Okay, we'll start with Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin. We'll just group those two together. Flowers over them. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna go Jordan Addison, who maybe you have in the same tier as those guys, but I have him a little bit ahead of those two.
He's pretty close. If the stupid Vikings would, what are we doing here? Like,
I know. And by the way, for the record, we're recording this before the Thursday night game,
yeah.
so I want to throw that out there. I did this with Ian Harditz too last week when we were talking about the Lions, and he actually kind of nailed it with the Lions. He thought that they might not be as good offensively and blah, blah, whatever. But I mean, hopefully, let's throw this out there into the universe. Hopefully, he runs the second most routes on that team tonight.
Yes, stop it. Like it's so frustrating when you can know halfway through the game, that guy should probably be our number 2 wide receiver. Make the change.
Yeah.
Do it right now.
Yeah.
Like, stop with the veteran. We got to give them their due. No, you're trying to win a football game, and I'm trying to win my fantasy football game, and I don't have KJ Osborne, so put Addison out there.
Yeah. Just do the right thing. Come on. So Addison, you're going Flowers over Addison right now. Again, you realize whatever you say here, if you say Flowers over Addison, that means Addison's going to have a 3-touchdown game tonight. If you go Addison over Flowers, then he's going to have 0 points.
That's a win-win for me, JJ, because I got them both in my 2 important spots, just in the opposite direction. So I will take that. I think I would. I mean, oh gosh. PPR, yeah, scoring format to the rescue. PPR, I'll go Zay Flowers.
Yeah, there you go. That's the analyst
trick. It's the biggest
trick.
Cop out in fantasy analysis. Yes. What's your scoring format? Yeah, okay.
Such a cop out. All right, that's fair though. That's fair. I have Zay ahead of Jordan Addison right now, rest of the season.
Ooh, I love it.
But they're close enough. I mean, they're probably like 5 spots in overall rank, not even wide receiver rank.
Okay.
Let's go. This is I think this is a hard one. Okay. Deebo Samuel.
Ooh. I think I'll still keep Deebo.
Yeah, I have Deebo 1 spot ahead of Zay. I think Deebo is kind of the line because I have Zay right now, wide receiver 20-ish, and Deebo like wide receiver. You know, they're both like mid-range wide receiver 2s. You know, I know Brandon Ayuk dominated. I have Brandon Ayuk straight up over Deebo moving forward. Sure. To me, he was the better value in drafts and such this offseason. But regardless of that, Deebo, I still think this offense is going to just take advantage of whatever the defense is giving and whatever type of defense their opponent's playing. And week 1 really favored Brandon Ayuk. We're just going to see this rotation as we knew going into the season, right? Like that was. Like, we knew this was the case to some degree. I mean, maybe not as lopsided from a production standpoint as what we saw week 1 with Ayuk, but, I still think Deebo is going to be fine enough. And
I don't remember where I heard it, but I feel like there's splits of, the Yins, or you can tell me if this is true, I've heard that in secondaries that favor man defense, that's when you see Ayuk go off.
Yep.
And secondaries that favor a zone defense, that's when you see Deebo go off.
Right.
So I mean, I don't know enough about
which makes sense.
Pittsburgh, what they're doing. I mean, they got. I mean, how are you enjoying my boy Patrick?
Your boy Patrick?
Arizona.
Patrick Peterson. Patrick Peterson.
Yeah.
You know that one of the questions that I get, I get the question all the time, who is your team? Like, people don't know what team I root for or what team they don't know what team. But here's the thing.
Do they listen to any of your content? You won't stop talking about the freaking Steelers.
Yeah, that's all I do is talk about how much I love the Steelers. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know it because we've hung out so much and you know my background and where I'm from and all of that. But look, the Steelers defense is rough, man. So I do think that when you get these technicians as route runners going up against them, which is why historically we've seen slot guys really destroy the Steelers. It's part of the problem, part of the reason. I remember like Keenan Allen played against them and just will destroy them, right? I could see that with like Elijah Moore this week. And so, that's why Brandon Ayuk, I think, had the game that he had. The worry for me going into that game was we just didn't know what Brock Purdy was going to, like, we had no idea what that was going to look like. And so, he ended up looking great. So that's why I think Deebo I can safely put above Zay. Maybe not safely, but I feel okay putting him above Zay. But that's where I'm at, man. Like I am very. I think when you get a situation like this, when a good, and this is a little bit different from Puka because we have that backbone, like I was talking about earlier. We know that Zay Flowers, or at least we have a better idea that Zay Flowers is a very, very good player, given everything that we look at. Production, whether you're looking at film, how other people viewed him. It was a consensus for the most part. This guy's good. There's going to be some people that look through analytics and prospect through analytics that said, no, he's not an early declare. I don't want him. But, we need to get past that. It's an input, but it's definitely not everything, not even close to everything.
Sure. And you have to love that this wasn't just the ball. Like some guys, you're like, oh, the ball finds them. Like they just, they're just a magnet for it. This was the opposite. This was the Baltimore Ravens were like, we need to get the ball to Zay Flowers, and we need to do it nonstop for the entirety of the game. And then I had shared this one. Someone had tweeted one of the screen passes, and they did this really cool slow-mo cut of it. So you can find that on my Twitter. But it was just the nastiest moves of making professional defenders look foolish.
Yeah.
in his first ever NFL game.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
You got to be really excited for Zay Flowers moving forward.
Yeah, I'm going to take the aggressive side when it comes to these younger players. I'm going to go after them on the waiver wire. I'm going to buy more often than sell. There are very few instances where I wouldn't go that route. Speaking of a wide receiver who I think we've both been on at times throughout his career and like as a player, Michael Pittman, man. How about Michael Pittman?
Oh, yeah, Pity City.
Coming through with a big week one. He's someone who I had as a fade early in the offseason because I was worried about the offensive situation and having a mobile rookie quarterback. And then his ADP just kept falling and falling and falling. And he ended up on some of my teams as a result because his ADP was falling. I talked about that a bit before the season started. Do you think, though, based on week one, they threw the ball 37 times. Anthony Richardson had 37 passes, or maybe it was a combination of him and Minshew. Or I think Richardson had the 37 attempts. But regardless, they threw the ball a lot more than any of us expected. Game script plays a role in that, obviously. But do you think that Michael Pittman with a 28% target share, the clear number one in this offense? I did some research on RPOs, and it showed that RPO-heavy offenses will target and really fixate on these top wideouts. That was stuff that Ben Gretsch had introduced into my brain, and I just kind of researched it a little bit more. I mean, is he really an obvious sell candidate, or is he someone that you're holding, or is he someone that you're actually buying?
I don't know. I don't know that I'd be buying. I have him in my most important league, and it was one of the saddest, most regrettable draft picks I had to make.
Yeah.
Where it's like, guys, look at the board.
Right,
right. Like who is left? I know that Michael Pittman is a good player. I know it. But his situation, talent versus situation. Week one, talent has won out, and maybe situation has changed, because I agree with you that it was Richardson threw the ball 37 times, 65% completion rate, over 200 yards. I think that was pretty surprising to me, as I've kind of been of our show the most vocal of, I don't know how you take that Anthony Richardson that I watched in college and say, yeah, we're super confident that this is going to work out as a pro. Like I've seen this archetype before, and it does not work. But so far through week one, it does. The 37 pass attempts is extremely exciting. Now, perhaps this was a situation of they saw what the Jags were doing on offense with Calvin Ridley back from the grave to be right into being like, oh, gosh dang it, Calvin Ridley's really that good? So perhaps they looked at that and said, we have to keep pace. And now in week two versus Houston, it's going to be more of a nasty, slow the game down a little bit. But I wouldn't buy, but I wouldn't sell. Like if I drafted Michael Pittman, I'm gonna ride this thing out a little bit more and hope that I had a value instead of trying to just quick capitalize and ship him out.
Yeah, because here's the thing, too, is that in spots that I have him, it was in a league where people clearly didn't like him, right? Similar to your situation. And you have to think about the psychology of your league mates. And if he did fall in your draft, it's not like all of a sudden your league mates are going to be like, oh, I need to get Michael Pittman. I need to trade for Michael Pittman. If they didn't like him that much in the preseason, it's one game. I would hold if I had him almost regardless of situations. I just don't think that people are buying him after that performance. I don't think that
I
exists.
have him, and I'm like, I don't know.
Right. I think he's like he was one of those players where every Sunday night and into Monday, I'm looking at guys who I can feature in the 15 transactions show and on my 15 transactions list, and he was one honestly that I immediately looked at and was like, oh, this is a sell candidate. And then I thought about it more. I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think he's a sell. I think he's more of a hold right now, just given that situation. Let it play out a little bit and kind of see what happens, because we know that the talent's there, and we know that versus, I wasn't a big Alec Pierce fan coming out. I did like Josh Downs though a lot, and Downs played a decent bit and had a decent enough target share in his debut. But even still, he's the most talented player in that offense from a receiving standpoint. Maybe they get more run heavy if Jonathan Taylor comes back and plays for them, but it's probably more of a hold.
Like, to illustrate where we were before, or let's just go last Wednesday.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce is not going to play, and I go, I can't play Michael Pittman. I've got Sky Moore, baby. This of course is going to work. Oh yeah. So Sky Moore went in for my flex position instead of Michael Pittman this week. It did not work.
Yeah, that's rough. I mean, to be fair, I dropped Puka Nacua in a league because I said to myself,
"Oh no!"
I said to myself, I got a lot of Puka Nacua across my leagues. Sure, I'm gonna, I'll diversify a little bit. And I picked up, because I have a team with bad tight ends, I picked up Isaiah Likely for Puka Nacua.
Oh yeah, locked in.
Yeah,
top 10 option.
It's like there's no way that Nacua is gonna have this amazing opening day, right? Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
Oh man, football's fun.
So, after week 1, we were just talking about buy candidates and such. You think there are any like under the radar buy candidates that aren't, because a lot of people say the same guys, like Jahmyr Gibbs is, I even featured Jahmyr Gibbs on 15 transactions. This is a pretty easy buy candidate, but do you think that there are any that after week 17, we're gonna look back and see that these guys we really kind of understated what happened in week 1?
I would say it can't be a Mike JJ collab without talking about Khalil Herbert.
Here it is.
Starting running back of the Chicago Bears. People, starting running back. Look, Roschon Johnson, maybe. Maybe. I understand he had all those receptions and stuff. It was all at the end of the game. Khalil Herbert and Deonta Foreman were already done. They had already pulled them out of the game, and they're just letting the rookie, let's see what we have. But Khalil Herbert is good. He is a tremendous player. He was even getting targets. So, I mean, I think the concerns that the Chicago Bears screwed up their offense yet again, I think that those are real concerns. I'm going to choose to believe that they'll figure it out over the next couple of weeks, because they figured it out last year. I mean, 2 designed runs for Justin Fields is like that's a fireable offense. If I'm a general manager, that your quarterback has a superpower and you don't want to use it, that's ridiculous.
Right.
But to me, it will be an RBBC. So this isn't like Khalil Herbert's going to be a top 10 running back. No, but he's the starter. I think this offense is going to get better. If before the year you bought into the Bears offense, give it more than 1 week. And Khalil Herbert should be the biggest benefactor to me for running backs for the Chicago Bears. I think that the talent is there. I know that there's not a lot of investment. The draft capital's not there for Khalil Herbert, but they let David Montgomery walk. And they were heading into most of the offseason saying, we are comfortable with this. And then Roschon Johnson was, I think, a 4th-round pick. So what's the difference between a 4th and a 6th-round pick? Really not a ton when we're looking at actual fantasy analysis of running backs that hit from that area. So I'm still in on Khalil Herbert ending up being a great value from draft day. And then the other player who is a buy low from your waiver wire, like the guy's probably on the waiver wire, it's Fergalicious, Jake Ferguson from the Dallas Cowboys. Throw week 1 into the garbage.
Yeah.
Like there is nothing to extract from what happened, anything offensively for the Dallas Cowboys, other than Tony Pollard. You were on you were a guest spot on the Footballers. You had Tony Pollard as your fantasy MVP. You and Reeves, and I was in lockstep with you guys of like, I don't know how you leave the second without Tony Pollard if he's there for you.
Yeah.
And it was the only thing that made it hard for me is like I loved Garrett Wilson, and depending on where I was in the second, like I don't know that if I don't take Olave right here, I'm not going to get him, and that hurt my soul. So that was the only conundrum for me in the second is how do I leave without like Olave, Wilson, or Pollard? And Pollard is going to destroy for fantasy football. But Ferguson, I mean, 7 targets, it turned into absolutely nothing. He didn't play particularly well, but that was just a Sunday night massacre of epic proportions that just don't worry about it. I mean, if you want to look at the behind the scenes, I think we had said he ran like 14 routes or something. So it was like, well, his target per route run is 50%. Which is just, it's ridiculous to even go to that. But the point is, he is still the starter. Dak Prescott has always utilized the tight end position. He made Dalton Schultz I guess he didn't make him a bunch of money, but he made him like a household name for a little bit, and then he gets the contract. But But even the Cowboys, I think that said a lot. That the Cowboys said we don't need to re-sign Schultz.
Right.
We'll just have whoever, and Dak Prescott will make them relevant. We had a broken down Jason Witten giving us valuable fantasy points with Dak Prescott. He just that's his tendency. He utilizes that position right in the middle of the field, and Ferguson he either didn't get drafted or he got picked up and then he got dropped. Like he's on waiver wires everywhere, and I would be really quick to scoop him up.
So two things. Number one, the Khalil Herbert call out was Mike has been on this show once before when
That's right.
we looked at running backs, prospects, because I bring on guests whenever I talk running backs, wide receivers, and quarterbacks each year during draft season. And Mike and I were talking about Khalil Herbert on that show, and you were hyping him up quite a bit. You've been a truther from the start with Herbert, and he looked good in my model too. Yeah,
it's taken some time, but I think we're there.
I think we got there. The Jake Ferguson call out's great though. I mean, I thought that he was a really interesting profile entering this year, where he was like top 10 in rookie yards per route run and targets per route run, since 2011. Limited routes obviously, and then week one, I saw that Mike Leone from Establish the Run had tweeted that in week one he had the most expected fantasy points of any tight end. Jake Ferguson did. Now that's at the tight end position, which doesn't take much to be first in expected points at that position. But that's still something, especially when you compare that to what his production was. I'm really, really glad that you called him out because I didn't talk about him enough this week on the show. So it was a really good call out.
Yeah, pick him up.
Lastly, a couple more things really quick.
However long you want to go, man.
Yeah, we're gonna do this for 4 hours. I hope you guys are ready. This is a Rogan special. So we saw some really disappointing performances from offenses in week one. It almost felt like a continuation of what we saw in 2022, where there were just some offenses, just a handful of them, that were great for fantasy football, like Miami, like the Chargers. And then, obviously that game environment was good, but then there was just so many offenses that just were so bad and just so worthless from a fantasy perspective. There's a little fear that's going to continue throughout the season like it did last year. You get a lot of these shorter average depth of target throws, and it's just not as fun to watch, not as many downfield throws, etc. You had the Bengals really underperform in that rain. You had the Seahawks really underperform, and they didn't have weather to blame. The Seahawks to me was more surprising than Cincinnati in week one. But after watching week one, after analyzing week one, which offense do you think might end up just disappointing this season versus the way that we sort of viewed that offense entering the fantasy season?
So the big concern for me is Seattle. Like Joe Burrow with his tiny hands, he can't handle the rain.
Yeah,
we get that. But Seattle was okay in the first half. The yardage split, I can't remember exactly what it was, but Geno had over 100 yards, maybe like 110, 120. Not great, not catastrophic by any means. And then in the second half, they lost 2 offensive linemen, and everything just went down the toilet. And those, if you're tracking the reports right now, Pete Carroll is not optimistic about either of those linemen returning. They gave us a front office. They spoke with their actions. They brought in 41-year-old Jason Peters to hopefully come and play offensive line for them. I mean, that's a panic alarm if I've ever heard one. And then they're talking about, well, we're going to bring up some people from the practice squad. And it's like, this is a disaster. And now that team in week 2 with a busted O-line gets to go match up with Aiden Hutchinson and crew. And while we're all crossing our fingers and super hopeful that we get just a duplicate shootout that we got last year, I am very concerned for Seattle this week. And then if the offensive line can't get fixed, then you're going to have a massive problem just all year long for the Seahawks. So that's who I'm worried about. And it's not that I think Geno's good. I still believe in everybody on that team. But if you don't have an offensive line, there's just nothing. You can't compete in the NFL.
Yeah, I think a contrarian defense this week is Detroit, based on the offensive line situation.
I do not hate that.
Yeah, I mean, look, the game last year almost scored like 100 points, right? And then you look at the FanDuel Sportsbook opening line and where it's at right now, it's not that high. Like, I think it's still like 46, 47 points. And so maybe 47.5. But regardless, it's not nearly as high I think is what maybe a football watcher would have assumed based on what happened last year. I think a lot of that comes back to that offensive line and what Detroit was semi able to do, against the Chiefs in week 1. So it's definitely a concern moving forward. Now, Mike, the last thing I want to talk to you about, this is more not really a football analysis related question, but you guys are the fantasy footballers. Your audience has become massive, right? I always say that there's
super massive, but yeah.
Yeah, right. And so I always, when I talk to folks about doing fantasy analysis and stuff and talk to patrons or listeners, what have you, it's really difficult sometimes to speak to an audience just in general, whether it's as big as you guys, whether it's my show, whatever the audience is. When you have hundreds of people, thousands of people, whatever that number is, it's really hard to sort of make your content fit everyone's league type.
Sure. Yeah.
Is that the hardest thing that you probably come across, as an analyst in the space with the audience that you guys have, or is there something else that makes what you do difficult? Now, I say what we do difficult. Let's take a step back and realize that I'm not saying that our jobs are difficult. We have the best jobs on the planet, but of course, within the context, what is it that makes it difficult?
So it's funny. It's really funny you bring up league type, because the Superflex people would have you believe that they are the overwhelming vast majority of fantasy football leagues. And I have no problem with the Superflex league type. I think it's fun to bring more importance into the quarterback position, or if you where it's really devalued in single quarterback. But you're not. You're just right. I hate to tell you this. I hate to burst that bubble of yours. You are very small in comparison to just how humongous fantasy football is, and there are so many more casual people than you can even realize.
Yeah.
I mean, even we have, I will have an issue sometimes of when you get in the flow of the conversation, and you just throw out the name of this player who's like the running back 3 on a team, and you forget to stop and be like, okay, Kendre Miller, New Orleans Saints rookie running back, because there's so many people who they don't know who that is, and you need to bring them in. Like that's kind of what you want to do. You want to educate people, so you catch yourself or you catch yourself not repeating the name. You know what I mean? Like there's certain tricks that you have to go with, because you can mention a player's name, you end up in a 5-minute analysis riff, and then someone's like, I don't know who you were talking about.
Yep.
And I don't want to rewind and go figure out who you're talking about. So there's that. Trying to make sure that everyone feels appreciated, because you don't want to leave the Superflex people out. They're very passionate, clearly, because
they are.
I mean, they let you know that they're in Superflex leagues and that you're not doing enough Superflex content.
Yeah, right.
So
they're like CrossFit people.
Oh yeah. I was gonna make the joke, but I pulled my punch. Because there's the Venn diagram. It's a complete circle.
Okay, how about this? I'll make fun of myself. They're like Peloton people.
Okay. Oh yeah, but we're Peloton people. How big are your quads at this point, JJ?
They're getting big, man.
Can you buy pants at the mall, or do you have to go to the big and tall now?
I mean, look, I'm coming after AJ Dillon. Last year I was playing against him in the Sleeper Bowl and I beat him, and I therefore won the
took the quad award.
Yeah, I have the quad award now. Yeah, exactly. They're big, man. Yeah. I mean, I like riding the Peloton, man. It's been a good piece of my life.
Oh, it's great, but I don't understand what you Inhumans are doing on this machine.
Yeah, well, we also haven't seen each other in probably 5 years at this point. It's been a while.
And at this point, I imagine you're going to look like you walked in, like you're going to be all bow-legged because the bone structure of your legs has just gone full distorted.
This is for the record, this is the most off the rails that the Late Round Perspectives has gotten since I started the show. This is
what did you think of you invited me on the show, man?
Fitting that you're the one on the show that's making it go off the rails. I want to add one thing about what we were just talking about with Superflex people.
About Peloton?
Yeah, about Peloton. Sam Yo. No, I'm just kidding.
Sam's great.
Sam's great though. Yeah, Ben's also good. But with the fantasy advice and giving this advice based on these different league types and stuff, I actually went on a little rant on the Q&A that I did for patrons on Tuesday. We do a waiver wire Q&A. And I went on this little rant because everyone's asking what % of your free agent budget you should spend on these players. And
sure. Yep.
I feel like it's just not talked about enough in the fantasy space that it depends on the kind of league that you're in. It depends on how deep your benches are, what's out on the waiver wire, the league size, all of that kind of stuff. It's no different than in an auction draft. If you're walking in and you're in a 16-team league and everyone has $100, that means that, or $200, that means that there's $3,200 being spent on these guys. So all the players are more expensive. If you're in a 10-team league, then that's $2,000 in your little auction economy, and players are going to be cheaper. It's no different with free agent budgets. And I feel like it's a little bit frustrating when, we are putting, we have to some degree. We have to throw the caveat, this is a 12-team league, standard scoring, whatever, regular scoring. And this is how we would spend from a percentage standpoint. But there's so many caveats in fantasy football when we're giving this advice that I think is really hard to capture sometimes.
It absolutely is. We do that. We speak in percentages. I feel like that can close some of the gap for people. But our first piece of advice is always know your league. Like you go, are you a seasoned veteran and you're in a league full of a lot of newbies? Week one, get after it, because I know at least in our experience when we first got into Fab, everyone was so nervous to spend, and then it takes a few years to really figure out at what point of the year you want to have a surplus, what type of archetype of player are you willing to just go and make sure I get them. So like if you're in a league with newer people, you can extract value. I mean, same way that you unfortunately might fleece somebody in a trade because they don't exactly know what they're doing. I don't advise doing that, but like there's things like that, or just knowing, is this a running back heavy league? Like we host a gigantic tournament where it's a whole bunch of 12. It's very much like the fishbowl, but we call it's our Megla Bowl, and it's a tournament. Like, and your whole point is you're trying to outscore 20,000 people. So when someone becomes available on the waiver wire, you better go and get them, because you got to take your shot. You can't just, I'll put 11 here and hope that I get somebody of use. It's like, no, you got to be real aggressive. So that, it's very difficult to give actual percentage advice. We frequently will refer to like our league, and we'll like talk about our waivers and react, which it ends up being a lot of fun sometimes, because basically when we're hitting record, our waivers are rolling. Yeah. So we're all live finding out who did what, and we had just Jason hates Zach Moss more than.
I saw this a little bit. Yeah. Tell this story. Tell this story though. This is great.
So Jason, since he was drafted, was he was not on Team Zach Moss. Now I don't know how much the girls from Ball Blast, because they loved Zach Moss, and so like they got like very fun spirited just Twitter debates and over Zach Moss. But he's maintained the bit that he hates Zach Moss, and somehow he bid the most on Zach Moss in our league, and the show opens with this. So it was such a tremendous moment to realize, like, we've done that. We've all drafted the player. I don't want to draft this guy. Yeah. And then you do, and then they suck, and it's even worse. Yep. Because you didn't want him. Other people were telling you that player. So that's great. I did remember an actual answer, because you asked, like, what is the toughest part for the job? And it is, unfortunately, it's one of the episodes that is, like, people wait for this episode. It's the My Guys episode, where you are stating, these are 3 players that I am trying to get in every single league. And then you have social media is a tough place, but
Yep.
you then almost get judged on just those
Yes.
3 players.
Yep.
And you're like, I gave you so much advice about these other guys that I love. Like, so it's now like scary to be like, to look at your my guys. You're looking at you're breaking down early season schedule because you're like, I can't declare someone who is my guy knowing that their early season schedule is going to be bad because I'm going to get just 3,000 Reddit threads about how I didn't get my guys right this year. So that's the, like, in terms of content, that's the most frustrating, but also exciting because you're saying these are my guys.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting. We'll see. Tyler Lockett's one of my guys, and week 1 was real bad.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, man, because I've said it a lot where your fantasy season as an analyst really hinges on particular players, and really you can meet people online in just a brief moment and they take some piece of advice from you, and no matter how that advice goes is going to dictate how that person views you as an analyst forever, right? Like you could sit there and say, yeah, start Elijah Moore this week, and if he tanks, then that person, you know, a lot of people are rational, to be fair. I'm not just going to generalize, but there are going to be a lot of people who have that advice and hear that advice, and if you're wrong with that advice, they're like, oh man, he sucks, he's a bad analyst, and then they'll, you know, go on Reddit and say, oh, he's a bad analyst without really much of a backing and stuff like that. And it's, you know, it's part of the gig, but at the same time, I do think that reaction as a human, right, it only makes you feel a little bit more worried about putting yourself out there more and potentially being vulnerable with the way that you're analyzing this stuff. That's a human nature thing, right? That is not a flaw or anything. It's just the way that folks are, you know? And so I agree. Like, I think, you know, obviously, you know, you brand it in a way where it's your guys. And so anytime you put yourself out there in a big way, people are going to come back in a big way, but it doesn't make it any more difficult. Right. Yep.
Yeah. I still have not escaped the shadow of Blake Jarwin. Somehow it was my fault. He went down to season-ending injury in week 1.
Is Jake Ferguson Blake Jarwin part 2? Is that what we're saying here?
I can't stop. I cannot stop myself with Dallas Cowboys tight ends. I have a sickness, but it was the process was correct.
Yes.
Trusting the process of Blake Jarwin. He just happened to turn into Dalton Schultz, and it was very correct.
Yeah,
it was very correct. I stand by it.
That was a fine process. It's like last week how I said Gus Edwards was the play as a deep sleeper last week, and then Justice Hill was the one who scored the fantasy points. But you know, I threw out there, maybe even on the show, I threw out there maybe Todd Monken's gonna like Justice Hill a little bit more because there were rumblings of that, you know, throughout the preseason and stuff. And then obviously it was Justice Hill who scores the 2 touchdowns, so I had to not put that check mark next to Gus Edwards, and I could have easily said Justice Hill on that podcast. But yeah, process, man. It's the process. Gotta love it. Anyway, Mike, great to catch up. Great to talk to you, as always. Can you let everyone know, I mean, they know where you are. Maybe not physically, but at least where all of your content is. But let everyone know where they can find you.
So the hub is thefantasyfootballers.com, or on social medias at FFHitman. Pretty much, I think that's my handle everywhere, even Peloton. So if you want to come ride with me, or I mean it's not JJ numbers, but my numbers are respectable.
They're strong. They're good. I'm on Twitter
at I get over 220 minutes. I feel okay about that.
That's strong. I mean, it's not my PR of 350 in 20 minutes, but it's no big deal.
You did a 350 in 20?
I hit a 351 in 20 minutes earlier in the summer.
What were you doing?
I took some steroids before.
No. People do not care about this, but it does not matter. What is your cadence and your resistance?
It was a climb. So anytime you get more, you know, you can get more. You can get more.
Yeah, but were you at like 80 the whole time?
No, I was at. I'm sure a lot of people are gonna be loving the ending of this episode.
The Peloton people are they're strong with us right now, JJ.
They're strong. Very strong. Yeah. So there's about a 0.05% of the audience still listening. No, my average. I had a screenshot that I posted to Twitter whenever it happened because I finished the ride and I was like, oh my God, like I did that thing after I finished it because I was trying to get 350 for a while. Resistance average was probably in the 70s, though.
That's unbelievable, man.
Yeah, the quads are strong, man. The quads are there.
It
runs. Look, Zach Arisen's. They might not have the smartest brains, but they got some big quads. It runs in the
You got
family.
a lineage? Like, no watermelon stands a chance?
Yeah, oh yeah, man. My dad was a runner growing up, like when I was growing up and stuff, and he's a beast. You know, there's a strong Zach Arisen quad game going on, and that definitely helps me in the Peloton world. For sure.
Well, I have bird legs, so I've got that going on.
There we go. Next time we see each other, we'll compare legs. It'll be super normal.
No, we will. Yeah, I'll put mine 2 together, tier 1.
Anyway, you can find me on Twitter at LateRoundQB. All my stuff over on LateRound.com, and then I have an Instagram now that I started a couple weeks ago at LateRoundFF. Mike, great talking to you.
JJ's putting out good pictures, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm actually making all the graphics too. It's all on me.
No, you're not.
I am. I have that background a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You're a nerd.
I am a nerd. I'm a huge nerd. As always, though, everyone, thanks for tuning in.